And now we're about to finish Season 2 of the early Muslim expansion.
6 AD, the entire Near East had been transformed into a completely different geopolitical entity than it was just 2 decades before, and had been for many centuries prior. On its eastern wing, a 4-century-old dynasty, the Sassanids, were now all but dust, its last true Shah pursued across Iran by eastward driving Muslim armies and its ancient territory devoured. In the north, Rashidun forces reached the Caucasus mountain barrier, enclosing the once insurmountable Byzantine Empire within its Anatolian heartland in the process. Now that all major battles against Rome and Persia were at an end, Islam's armies began seeking another direction in which to conquer.
It really is impressive. I keep mentioning this and I apologize, but just how quickly everything changed in such a short amount of time too. You know, like certain empires or kingdoms spend like centuries growing, like Rome for example. This happened in like 2 decades, like a lifetime. Like, you know what I mean? It's insane just how quickly the Muslims expanded and just basically became a dominant superpower in the world, you know? It never fails to amaze me, just the speed and the rise of how quickly they expanded, you know?
Once Constans II's counterattack against Egypt was decisively repelled, Caliph Uthman's foster brother Abdullah ibn Sa'd began launching raids into the Roman Berber lands west of his new province. These small expeditions quickly proved a stunning success, returning with vast quantities of slaves, cattle, and other riches. Judging that Roman Africa would yield an easy and generous bounty if squeezed, the Egyptian governor wrote to Uthman asking for permission to launch a major campaign to the west. Uthman agreed with Abdullah's assessment and decreed the formation of a 10,000-strong force in Arabia, composed of warriors from various tribes. It was a relatively young army, and in its ranks marched one son of Amr, 2 sons of Umar, and 2 sons of Umayyad chief Al-Hakam, one of whom was the future Marwan I. The freshly mustered Arab force was ready for war in early 647 and marched for Egypt, joining Abdullah ibn Sa'd at Fustat a few weeks later. There, the 10,000 newly arrived Arabic fighters were merged with a further 10,000 from the governor's Egyptian army, resulting in a total strength of 20,000. With this mostly camel and horse-mounted invasion force at his back, Abdullah marched west. This part of the Mediterranean seaboard bore witness to some of the ancient world's most dramatic events during the course of several centuries. Emperor Heraclius' father had previously served as ruler of this sizable exarchate of Africa before his son's ascension to the Byzantine throne in 610, upon which the elder governor died. Close to the emperor's death in 641, Heraclius himself appointed as exarch a patrician known as Gregory. However, dynastic chaos following the death of Heraclius and Constans II's inability to repel Muslim attacks, particularly in nearby Egypt, were all too much for Gregory. In 647, as Uthman's army was in the process of readying to attack him, the exarch declared independence from Constantinople amid a surge of popular support from Romanized Africans and native Berbers alike.
Again, like the Romans and their self-destructive ways, man. Already, like, turning on each other, rebelling, like... It is amazing just to see just how the Romans just self-sabotage so much in history, you know?
Abdullah ibn Sa'd, meanwhile, crossed the Nile from Fustat and took his army up the west bank until he neared Alexandria, at which point he drove northwest and cut across the desert as a shortcut. After a few more days, the Viceroy's 20,000 hit the Mediterranean coastal road and marched along.
I do know that the Muslims I think Islam even went all the way to Spain, so it seems like Gregory's little new kingdom is about to be incredibly short-lived, you know?
Along its course until, finally, after a 6-week journey, Abdullah reached Barca, the city which his predecessor Amr seized years before. The Muslims then marched a further 700 miles along the Mediterranean coast around the Bay of Sirte, enduring the scorching privations of a North African summer. The Arabs were used to such arid conditions and thrived in them, an advantage which helped them conquer the Near East. When the Rashidun army finally reached Tripoli, closer to the heart of Gregory's realm, its warriors found the heavily fortified city barred against them, contrary to the friendly reception they'd received in Cyrenaica. As Amr did half a decade earlier, Abdullah blockaded Tripoli on its landward flank and placed it under siege. In order to slow or prevent any resupply or reinforcement by ship, Abdullah stationed artillery at both points where the city wall met the water. They were ordered to strike any enemy vessel which attempted to enter the harbour, and effectively rendered the seaport unusable. Gregory, who was readying the main Exarchate army at his inland capital of Sufetula, had a naval reinforcement armada dispatched from Carthage to Tripoli. However, rather than disembarking at the port on arrival as they would have liked, the transport ships were forced to disgorge their human cargo on segments of the beach which were outside of Abdullah's artillery range and outside the wall's protection. Although this prevented Rashidun catapults and ballistae from carving bloody holes into their ranks, it made the tired and disorganized soldiers easy prey for Muslim infantry, which charged at them from two different angles. Exhausted from the long sea voyage and without any time to deploy adequately, Gregory's reinforcements were scythed down to a man on the beaches of Libya. Remaining vigilant against any further attempts to prop Tripoli up, Rashidun forces nevertheless were unable to breach the well-provisioned, nigh impregnable fortress. As his army languished outside the walls, Abdullah ordered riders to scout in the direction of Sufetula to observe any military activity going on there. A few weeks later, two things were clear to the Muslim governor. First, Tripoli was still a long ways away from opening its gates to him, and remaining static outside its walls seemed pointless. Second, reports from his scouts made it apparent to Abdullah that the newly independent Roman Exarch was planning for a fight. Possibly convinced Tripoli was just a delaying action, which only served to grind down his own army's strength and will to push on, the Muslim governor lifted his siege and spirited away to the west. The Rashidun army and its thrifty commander plundered their way through the wealthiest region of Roman Africa, unmoored from any supply train and therefore unconcerned about the Tripoli garrison behind them. At Sufetula, Gregory was made aware of the Muslims' location the moment they passed through Gabes, and reacted to the news immediately, with the intent of engaging his enemy well away from his interim inland capital. To do this, the Exarch ponderously shifted his heavily equipped, primarily infantry-based army, which probably matched that of the Muslims in size, to a blocking position at Faiz, 30 kilometers from Sufetula, and set up a camp there. Part of the Exarchate's army was placed slightly forward of the camp as a covering force. However, only a short time after Gregory's force went into camp, the Rashidun light cavalry advance guard fell on its Roman counterpart, sending it reeling back into the main camp in flight. Unnerved by such strength from the Muslim mounted units, Gregory ordered his army to withdraw all the way to Sufetula, believing his position at Faiz was too vulnerable. About 4 miles east of his capital, the Exarch turned and readied for battle. Such close proximity to its base granted the Roman army logistical supremacy, prevented wide flanking maneuvers from the mobile opposing army, and permitted them a safe retreat inside if they needed it. The Muslims arrived soon after and made their own camp a short way from Gregory's front line. One rejected.
That's interesting. So far, like I said, I think Gregory's kingdom is about to be incredibly short-lived, but this ain't such a bad position. Easy way to retreat back to the fortress, no wide flanking, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good position. Um, looking forward to seeing more of Abdullah. That's the name. I apologize. Why can't I see that well? Well, either way, point is, looking forward to seeing what he's up to. And so far, but it does. I don't even think at the moment it seems like the Muslims can just straight up outfight their enemy without any, like, flanking or anything like special maneuvers. Seems like they're just better fighters straight up. So, yeah.
Emissary later, both sides deployed for battle on the arid plain about 4 miles from Sufetula. The Roman army's posture was defensive, its line anchored to the north and south by 2 high ridges. Abdullah, realizing the observation potential of these terrain features, successfully sent forces to occupy them. Unlike his more iron-willed predecessor, Abdullah ibn Sa'd was considered personally weak by the warriors under his command, an accountant and bureaucrat rather than general or soldier.
I don't know, man. Like, whenever I think of that, I think of like freaking Eumenes. He was just a secretary, and he was out here, like, outwitting Antigonus and like being a rival to a great Diadochi general. Like, that's just an example, but like, sometimes someone from a more humble beginning can kind of surprise the world. But it's interesting that Abdullah is already kind of, like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing what he's made of, because we're kind of following him now, it seems. He seems to be the new guy around here. And it's interesting that he's just mentioned that apparently his soldiers thought his character was weak and that he was unproven. So I guess he's gonna have to change that, by winning a few battles, quickly change. I don't know, I'm putting my faith in him. He seems like an underdog, at least in that sense, needs to prove himself.
Lacking Amr's bravery, Abdullah retreated to a safe position behind the line, where he was not likely to suffer any personal threat once the army was deployed to his liking.
Well, at least he's... I always thought, like, sometimes, like, there's a lot of respect with commanders who just lead and are in the thick of the fighting, for sure, but I always thought, like, especially in later stages of war, it's probably best for commanders to be more safe and in the back, preferably to look at the battle and kind of guide it. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with not being in the thick of the fighting. I actually think at times it's probably better for commanders not to put themselves at risk, but I get, like, this looks a bit more cowardly, because he's a bit more further away. But still, like, I think at the end of the day, like, I'm kind of, like, I don't know, I have a weird rooting for him kind of thing, because he seems like he needs to prove himself. I kind of hope he does, prove everyone wrong, but I don't know, man. I guess we'll see.
Fortunately, Gregory was a kindred spirit in that he wasn't a bold frontline commander either, choosing to oversee the clash from a throne inside the walls of Sufetula. Subordinates and lower-level officers fought the battle for him on a tactical level. At the dawn of the next day, fighting commenced. Details about the first days of Sufetula are unclear and sparse in our sources, but it is evident that the combat was incredibly fierce, uninterrupted, and bloody. Although the actual battlefield was a flat plain, the ridges on either flank prevented any outflanking maneuvers or fancy tactical flair. Moreover, the uninvolved...
Yeah, it's just a complete fight now, huh? Like, nothing fancy, at least yet, unless they find another way to get around, but so far it's just who's the better fighters,
nature of both armies' skittish commanders further paralyzed the situation. After a few days of such indecisive fighting, Gregory decided to attempt an assassination of the enemy leader in order to sever the head from the Muslim serpent, but obviously wasn't going to do the deed himself. Instead, he offered to wed his legendarily beautiful, intelligent, and valiant daughter to the Roman warrior who killed Abdullah. Morale in the Exarch's army skyrocketed at this meeting.
Oh man, nothing like the the potential of getting a total baddie to push a man forward, right? I love that. That's hilarious.
Used with each warrior, whether they
for a second there, I thought Gregory was gonna offer his daughter to Abdullah and like have her try to kill him. I don't know why. That's where my head went at first. I was being like, "Dang, that's underhanded," but wild,
were Roman, Vandalic, Greek, or Berber, stealing themselves with the aim of gaining the princess's hand. Word of this also spread throughout the Muslim army, and in particular to Abdullah himself. Not at all comfortable with being a marked man, his confidence suffered an even further decline.
Oh.
To counter Gregory's offer, the Muslim commander announced to his army that he would grant the Exarch's daughter to any warrior who personally killed her father, before withdrawing to his
Oh, that's hilarious. I thought he was gonna be like, I'm gonna offer my daughter. Heck no. You can have his daughter if you kill him. Everyone's just using this woman as a bargaining chip. That's hilarious. Abdullah, man. So far, Kings in general seems to be throwing a lot of shade at both of these guys. Like, they're cowardly, they're not brave. This would be me if I were a commander, legit though. Like, I would be in the corner. You could have his daughter if you kill him. This would be me if I were to lead an army in these times. So I kind of maybe relate to them, because I'm not I don't think I have what it takes to ever be a military man. So, I kind of oddly relate to these guys. Oh man, that's hilarious.
tent. Still, however, the next few days continued as a deadly stalemate of bitter violence, brought to a crescendo by the offer and counteroffer between generals. This continued without end until one of Abdullah's officers, Zubayr, was approached by a Berber defector from Gregory's army. He told the Muslim captain that because fighting had until that point been quite far from the walls, the Exarch's position near Sufetula's northern gate was actually very thinly defended. Alerted to this crucial information and the best route which he should take in order to exploit the opportunity, Zubayr put forward his plan to the demoralized Muslim commander and was granted leadership over the army's mobile reserve, about 2,000 strong. The invaders' spirits were buoyed due to the dynamism and boldness of this dashing young officer, who spent the remainder of the day setting his scheme into motion. Swarmed by warriors who desired to embark on the risky venture with him, the younger Zubayr eventually selected 30 of the fiercest, most capable and valiant combatants his army could offer as an attack squad. When asked what they were to do, Zubayr replied, "I am attacking. Defend me against those who assail me from the rear, and I shall defend you from the front." During the near soundless hours of night, after issuing all necessary orders, Zubayr positioned himself, his 30 stalwarts, and the mobile reserve horsemen behind Sufetula's northern ridge. Then, when morning came, both armies closed with one another and fought as though nothing had changed. At noon, with an especially hot day weighing down on them heavily, both armies broke contact and withdrew, the Romans quickly, the Muslims suspiciously sluggishly. Distracted by the din of war, Gregory, his attendants and guards did not notice Zubayr and his band of daredevils gallop into the city through...
Man, Zubayr, I'm not sure I'm getting his name right, but this guy, MVP, if this works out, MVP of this video. Because Abdullah was content with just sitting in this deadlock, right? This stalemate, so thank goodness someone spoke up. Well, let's see if it works out, though.
What became known as the Gate of Treachery. Realizing what was happening, the Exarch's guard formed a hasty line, but the 30 Muslim warriors broke it and allowed Zubayr a clean run at the African ruler. In the confusion, Gregory initially believed this lone mounted figure to be an envoy, and so did not react. Gregory was killed and his head sliced from his body.
Ooh.
Word of their leader's death quickly reached the retreating Roman infantry. causing terrible confusion and disheartening the soldiers. Then, at the perfect moment, Zubayr's large mounted reserve crested the north ridge, rode at a gallop, and charged into the disorganized Exarchate army's left wing with saber and lance before wheeling around the battlefield. Simultaneously, the bulk of the Muslim infantry turned about and advanced, locking their tenacious enemy into an unwinnable fight. Pressured from the front by Arab infantry and outmaneuvered by swift Muslim horsemen all around, the Roman army collapsed and its soldiers scattered in all directions in their attempts to flee. Zubayr's cavalry reaped an especially bloody toll, and within a short time, the battered corpses of Romans, Berbers, Vandals, and Greeks littered the plain outside Sufetula.
Insane.
Despite the slaughter, several thousand of Gregory's soldiers managed to retreat intact towards the capital, believing its walls would grant them safety. It wasn't their lucky day. Zubayr, having handily dealt with the Exarch, sent small squadrons to hold each of Sufetula's gates, preventing entry or exit. When the retreating columns of exhausted Roman soldiers reached the city, therefore, they were viciously attacked by Muslim cavalry coming the other way and cut to pieces. The Rashidun triumph at Sufetula is frequently touted as the point at which Roman Africa was forever lost to the empire. And while it was a back-breaking moment for the province, this was far from true. Once the vast quantity of captured silver, gold, and...
That's awesome. Like, yeah. Granted, Abdullah won that battle mainly due to, his subordinates taking on the initiative there, but still, things are still going well, and the conquest of Africa now seems to be going pretty well, but it seems like there's still going to be, challenges.
Cattle was accumulated and distributed, Abdullah ibn Sa'd moved on the Exarchate's real capital, Carthage. Upon putting the millennia-old city to siege, the Muslim commander and local leaders within the city came to an impasse. There was no chance that the besiegers would be able to take Carthage with their overextended supply lines and barely functional siege train. But at the same time, there was no way for the inhabitants of Carthage to make them go away. However, with exaggerated reports of Gregory's fate fresh in their minds, they asked for terms after only a few days. Always with income on his brain, Abdullah ibn Sa'd accepted a vast quantity of Roman gold as payment to leave Africa alone, keeping only what they had so far conquered. After a subsequent eastward journey of about 3 months, the Muslim army arrived back in Fustat by late 647, bringing with it a vast hoard of wealth which further swelled the treasury in Medina. Regardless of the gathered loot, Abdullah had effectively won a victory and then given up the ghost before the conquest was...
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, anyone else would have kept going, right? Any other, commander that we kind of covered previously on this series. Yeah, I feel like Ammar would have kept going, or like Khalid, or any other Muslim commander, or at the very least send word to the Caliph for permission to keep going. Abdullah essentially just took wealth and left. Like, he just left it all alone. You know, he's a very different character already from the previous men, commanders, in that obviously he doesn't have the exact same bravery as them. And, seems like he's more, I guess you can say, willing to kind of call quits on things like that, instead of keep going, so, yeah.
At about this time, late 648, the governor of Syria, Muawiyah, launched a naval expedition of unknown scale to Cyprus in order to neutralize any potential threat that it posed as a staging point for future Byzantine attacks. Muawiyah landed on the Mediterranean island and seized it without opposition, exacting a tribute of 7,000 dinars annually. With the North African front winding down, most expansionist movement within the Rashidun Caliphate came to a halt. 3 years passed in relative quiet until Abdullah ibn Sa'd led another attempt to conquer Nubia in 652, failing once again due to the country's Archers of the Eye. Because the situation on land between Eastern Rome and the Caliphate had calcified at the Taurus Mountains, both sides began looking to the sea for an advantage. If Constantinople maintained its naval supremacy, it would have the ability to land a force in Syria, Egypt, or Africa at will. However, if the Caliphate usurped this control, they could make the Mediterranean a Muslim lake and even threaten the great imperial city. To that end, both the Egyptian governor and Roman emperor refocused their efforts on constructing vast fleets of ships with which to dominate the sea. In 654 AD, the Arab and Roman fleets met off the Lycian coast at what became known as the Battle of the Masts. Abdullah ibn Sa'd revealed himself to be a veritable sea wolf compared to his feeble reputation on land, crushing Constans II's navy in the first true Muslim naval triumph and clearing the way for an attack on Constantinople.
Good on you, Abdullah. Like, that was your problem. You just needed to find your calling, and it was apparently the sea. So I'm glad things have turned around, you know, because even Kings and Generals was roasting your butt right here in this video. I have faith in you, Abdullah. Mainly because I think I would be behaving exactly like him if I were there, you know. Yeah.
From the status of a subjugated, scorned, and irrelevant people of the desert, the Arabs burst forth from their ancient homeland in a manner akin to an irresistible sandstorm, blowing away everything in their path in the course of just 2 decades. The third season of the early Muslim expansion will come in late 2021, and we will cover famous battles like...
Yeah, so I have one more season to cover, Europe, North Africa, and Central Asia. So I will be covering that starting tomorrow. I'll see you all then, everybody. Bye.